The United Nations says more than 300,000 people have now fled the southern Gaza city of Rafah. The announcement came just hours after the Israeli government issued a new evacuation order, raising fears troops may soon invade the area. Last Monday, the IDF seized control of the Gaza side of the Rafah border crossing. Since then, there's been intense fighting in the area. Dozens of people have also been killed in airstrikes. The New York Times reports the top leader of Hamas is not now hiding in Rafah. Officials say the leader most likely never left the tunnel network under Khan Yunis, which is further north. It's believed he's also using a group of Israeli hostages as human shields. The officials tell the Times Israeli intelligence agencies agree with this American assessment. Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke about America's concerns over Israel's operation in Rafah during an interview with NBC's Meet the Press yesterday. He was also pressed on President Biden's threat to withhold weapons. Take a listen.
What we've seen over the last few months is a deep concern on our part about the possibility of a major military operation in Rafah. Given the damage it would do to civilians, there are more than 1.4 million Gazans in Rafah, most of whom have moved from other parts of Gaza. Absent a credible plan to get them out of harm's way and to support them, the president's been clear for some time that we couldn't and would not support a major military operation in Rafah.
I hear you saying you haven't seen a credible plan yet for how Israel would go into Rafah and mitigate civilian casualties. Is it fair to say that President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu are not seeing eye to eye right now?
There are two things. One is that, as the president said, and as we said in many conversations over the last couple of months, there has to be a credible plan for the civilians.
Have you seen a credible plan?
We have to make sure. We have not.
I want to drill down with you on President Biden's threat to withhold weapons. What exactly is his red line, Mr. Secretary? What would trigger him to say, I am now withholding weapons?
Look, we don't talk about red lines when it comes to Israel. We talk again.
President Biden did talk about a red line, though, Mr. Secretary, respectfully.
Let me be clear.
What would trigger him to make that decision?
Sure. So, first, we have been holding back, and we're in active conversations with Israel about the provision of heavy or high payload weapons, large bombs, because of the concern that we have about the effect these weapons can have when they're used in a dense urban environment, like Rafah. We're discussing that with Israel right now. Second, what the president said is that if Israel goes in with a major military operation in Rafah, in that case, there are certain systems that we will not provide to Israel that would aid that effort, because it's something that we do not want to be part of, given the damage that it would do to civilians. And again, not to achieve a durable, lasting, effective result for Israel and for its security.
All right, Richard Haass, you just returned from a trip from the Middle East where you had a chance to speak to leaders and obviously in off-the-record conversations. What is your great takeaway on your visit, your talks, and where the United States and Israel are right now in what seems to be the final stage of this war?
Good morning, Joe. Let me give you two big takeaways. One is when you go through the Arab world, it's hard not to be struck how the Arab leaders are ready to get close to Israel. They get up in the morning. What are they worried about? They're worried about Iran. They're worried about the various offshoots of Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, the Muslim Brotherhood and other such groups. And quite honestly, they've lost confidence in the United States over the last few administrations. So they want to get close to Israel. And what they need, though, is enough from Israel on the Palestinian issue that they can manage this getting close domestically, which brings me to Israel and my meetings there. What you're seeing here is essentially what's happening totally. The Israelis have prioritized very clearly pursuing the war, prosecuting the war over getting back the hostages. That to me is plain as day. They're going into Rafah. The only thing we don't know, Joe, is exactly the dimensions of it. They're angry at the United States. I think they're actually surprised that the United States took the step that President Biden did the other day. But I simply don't see any plan out of Israel for what happens after Rafah. And that's my biggest takeaway. They'll go in. They'll kill some more Hamas fighters. Unfortunately, some more civilians will get killed. But what then? And there's no answer to that in Israel. And what prevents there from being an answer, and I think what we're probably looking at is some type of prolonged Israeli occupation and some real messy situation in Gaza, is the politics won't allow this Israeli government, or this prime minister won't move in the direction of offering something up to and working with the Palestinians. So I think we're going to have Rafah, and in a month, some of the fundamental questions that have been out there for 7-8 months now are going to be out there plain as day.
Well, and Ed Luce, Richard underlined something that I've been hearing from leaders out of the Middle East for some time, and that is we're ready to help. This is going back months. We're ready to help. We want to go in and help the Israelis. We want to help with Gaza. We can talk about a peacekeeping force. We can rebuild Gaza. They want Hamas out of there. And said they would do it, oddly enough, that if the United States was there standing shoulder to shoulder with them and providing them support. And again, we could just talk generally and not tell people what's actually going on here. But it's what's been going on for the past 10, 15 years. Netanyahu doesn't want that, because Netanyahu doesn't want a two-state solution. Netanyahu wants to resettle Israelis in Gaza, or he wants Gaza to be completely under the control of Israel. He doesn't want peace there. He doesn't want Gaza rebuilt. He doesn't want a strong, independent Gaza with other Arab nations acting as peacekeepers protecting them.
Yeah, that is the key problem here. You know, Saudi normalization would be, which is the Biden administration's goal. The price for it would be a great win for Israel to have Saudi Arabia recognize Israel finally after all these decades. But the price of that normalization would be precisely what Netanyahu would have to be dragged kicking and screaming to do, namely creating a viable Palestinian Authority to replace Hamas, building up a non-violent Palestinian voice that can help govern a post-war Gaza as well as the West Bank, which is governing. Unfortunately, though, Netanyahu's coalition, the right of his coalition, Ben-Gvir, who, as you know, tweeted last week, Biden loves Hamas, when Biden announced the pause of those weapons shipments, that coalition would consider any viable Palestinian dialogue to be a betrayal of their values. They would then pull the plug on the coalition. There would be an election, and Netanyahu would not pass go. He would probably go straight to jail. So he has a conflict of interest. He does not want this war to end, and he doesn't want to alienate the right-wing coalition members that are keeping him in power and out of the courtroom.